One of the most exciting things that's happened in boxing over the past year has been Daniel Dubois discovering that he might be the baddest man on the planet, which has totally upended the heavyweight division. What's good? It's Woog. We've got Daniel Dubois, 22 wins and 2 losses, defending his IBF heavyweight title against Joseph Parker, 35 wins and 3 losses. Joseph Parker is a former WBO heavyweight champion. This is an exciting heavyweight fight, and it's taking place on the undercard of Beterbiev versus Bivol 2, one of the most, if not the most, stacked fight cards from top to bottom I've ever seen. Like, look at the top, I was gonna say top 7 fights, but Shakur Stevenson versus Floyd Schofield just fell through. They got a late replacement to fight Shakur Stevenson, the guy who just recently beat Chamberlain, which is unfortunate. I had done a whole preview on Shakur versus Floyd Schofield, and it was kind of like an alternative style breakdown because it wasn't like a fight that seemed like it was appropriate to take place given this stage of Floyd Schofield's career. But yeah, I guess I won't publish that now, but I'm glad that they got a replacement to fight Shakur Stevenson. But yeah, that's just the breaks in boxing sometimes. But let's talk about this heavyweight bout that is taking place between Daniel Dubois and Joseph Parker. You know, the road back to the title for Joseph Parker, it's been a long one. Like I said, he's the former WBO champion. This took place a little over 8 years ago. And it's kind of crazy to think that Joseph Parker is still only 33 years old. It feels like he's been fighting forever, right? So he beat Andy Ruiz back in December of 2016. In fact, that year, that was his 5th fight of 2016. Joseph Parker fought 5 times in 2016. He had wins over Carlos Takam, Alexander Dimitrenko, and finally Andy Ruiz in a very close majority decision win for Joseph Parker. He was only like 24 at the time, and Parker successfully defended that belt twice, the second of which was against Hughie Fury. He won that via majority decision. And then he had a title unification bout against Anthony Joshua, lost that one, but in doing so, he was the first to take Anthony Joshua the full 12 rounds. And it was a pretty competitive fight. It wasn't a spectacular fight. They didn't allow for a lot of inside fighting. The referee was kind of officiating that one sort of weirdly. But yeah, Anthony Joshua beat Joseph Parker via decision. Then Joseph Parker had a very important fight. And I feel like when you look at Joseph Parker's resume, the fight against Dillian Whyte is the one that I'm sure he really wishes he could get back. Like, I feel like he's got the tools and he's good enough to have beaten Dillian Whyte, but he got knocked down a couple of times, one of which was like by an elbow or a forearm, something nasty, and it clearly shook Joseph Parker up. But I remember him being way too patient in that fight, and Dillian Whyte being able to just win rounds that if Joseph Parker just put his foot on the gas a little bit more, he could have probably edged. Joseph Parker still finished strong. He almost had Dillian Whyte out by the end of that fight, but Dillian Whyte won the unanimous decision. And then Joseph Parker's road back to the title began. He won a few fights against lesser known fighters. Then he has a fight with Derek Chisora where Parker got dropped in the first round, like the first 10 seconds of the first round. This wasn't a great look for Joseph Parker. He ended up winning via split decision, but a lot of people thought that Derek Chisora won that fight. So they ran it back, and Joseph Parker looked a lot better in that rematch. He was controlling the distance and just basically outboxing and hurting Chisora, and he clearly won via unanimous decision in that rematch. So he kind of made up for, you know, the reputation hit after how close Parker versus Chisora 1 was. And that's not because Derek Chisora is a bad fighter by any stretch. I mean, you see what he's doing in his 40s right now. He just dominated Otto Wallin. But Joseph Parker was seen to be a, you know, like a top 3-ish, top 4-ish heavyweight for a few years. I mean, he was in that group with, you know, Andy Ruiz, Luis Ortiz, Alexander Povetkin, basically just a notch below who were considered to be the top 3 at the time. You know, Anthony Joshua, Tyson Fury, Deontay Wilder. This was before Alexander Usyk stormed the gates at heavyweight and changed everything. So after those back-to-back fights against Chisora, Joseph Parker fights Joe Joyce, and you rewatch that fight. This was such a punishing performance by Joe Joyce. This was like at the height of his juggernaut powers. This is actually right before he lost those back-to-back stoppages against Zhili Zhang. Joe Joyce did. Joe Joyce absolutely demoralized Joseph Parker. He beat the hell out of his body, and you see in that fight what made Joe Joyce such a phenomenon for that moment until his chin gave against, you know, the hard-hitting southpaw Zhili Zhang, who we're about to get to, because this video is actually going to be a double feature. We're talking Daniel Dubois versus Joseph Parker, and then we're going to get to Zhili Zhang versus Kabayel. But before those back-to-back stoppage losses at the hands of Zhang, Joe Joyce was a problem. Like, everybody wanted to see him fight one of the top heavyweights after he destroyed, over the course of 11 rounds, destroyed Joseph Parker. He is still the only person to ever stop Joseph Parker. Like, I've never seen Joseph Parker take a beating like that. And you saw Joseph Parker came in a little bit heavier. He was moving a lot. He was hitting Joe Joyce with so many clean punches, but even when Joseph Parker would nail Joe Joyce with like a beautiful right hand, Joe Joyce would just boom, boom, a couple punches to the body, like in that same exchange. Like, Parker would get off first, he would tag Joe Joyce, and Joe Joyce just reflexively would throw like 2 clubbing shots to the body. They would land, and you would see the reaction from Joseph Parker. So even in the exchanges where he was landing beautifully against Joe Joyce would look like he got the better of that exchange because of the work that he would do, whether it was just like a counter pummeling jab or 2 shots to the body. You would see in Joseph Parker's reaction that he was not having a good time in there. And it looked like the writing was on the wall like as early as like the 4th round, because Joseph Parker, he was winning a couple of the early rounds, but by like the 4th and 5th round, you could see Joe Joyce was just wearing him out to where Joseph Parker started to clinch. He was moving a lot. He was moving laterally where he's damn near walking away from Joe Joyce. Like, you could tell that Joseph Parker was not doing well. And if Joe Joyce just keeps on applying that pressure where he just boom, a big stiff jab, boom, a clubbing right, boom, boom, clubbing shots to the body, and just keep on marching through everything that Joseph Parker has to offer offensively, nothing was deterring Joe Joyce. And again, I feel like that really demoralized Joseph Parker. But I mean, he's a soldier. He hung in there. He took a lot of damage in that fight, and he ended up getting knocked out in the 11th round. This was a bad beating. And at that time, I was thinking, oh wow, so much for Joseph Parker's chances at getting another title shot. I thought that that was pretty much the beginning of the end of Joseph Parker's career. Because again, he might only be 33, biologically, but you see the people he's fought over the years: Dillian White, Chisora twice, Anthony Joshua, Andy Ruiz. He was for a long time the only guy to have beaten Andy Ruiz. Andy Ruiz has lost since, but Joseph Parker was the first to beat him. So Joseph Parker has experienced no shortage of wars, and seeing what he went through against Joe Joyce, yeah, I thought this might be about it for Joseph Parker, at least at the elite level, because again, he had never been stopped until he dealt with Joe Joyce. And it's kind of funny, like the poetic justice in the heavyweight division. So Joe Joyce, who's beaten Daniel Dubois, Joseph Parker's opponent here, by stoppage, but Joe Joyce demolished Joseph Parker, then Zhang demolished Joe Joyce twice, and then Joseph Parker beat Zhang via decision. So we've got this whole circular thing where A beats B, who beats C, who beats A. So after that devastating, loss to Joe Joyce, Joseph Parker then, beats Jack Massey via decision, wins a couple more fights in, pretty short turnaround time. So he's getting busy, right, against these lesser heavyweights, as he did after his losses to Joshua and Dillian White, right? You get back on the horse, you start rebuilding yourself. But the big turning point came when he fought Deontay Wilder in a fight that was supposed to be a setup fight. I don't know why they scheduled it as a setup fight. I mean, they were trying to angle for Deontay Wilder versus Anthony Joshua for that to finally happen. And I always thought that Joseph Parker had a better chance at upsetting Deontay Wilder than Otto Wallin had of upsetting Anthony Joshua, just matchup wise. I didn't see anything that Otto Wallin did better than Anthony Joshua, but I knew that Deontay Wilder was like a feast or famine fighter, and if Deontay Wilder's not finishing Joseph Parker with a devastating right hand, he's probably losing round after round after round, like he did against Gerald Washington, like he did against Luis Ortiz in their second fight. Well, Deontay Wilder again had to get through Joseph Parker to make that dream matchup against Anthony Joshua come true. Well, Joseph Parker won the vast majority of the rounds. Deontay Wilder looked like he never really got out of first gear, just kind of got outcrafted, outboxed. He wasn't throwing enough punches. He wasn't like taking a bad beating, but he was getting beaten up a bit, and Joseph Parker was just clearly running away with this one on the scorecards. This was a very redemptive moment for Joseph Parker. He beats the, former longtime WBC heavyweight champion and totally spoils any plans of Deontay Wilder versus Anthony Joshua. I know Wilder lost again to Zhang via brutal knockout after that, which further spoiled the plans. I mean, who knows? They might still do Wilder versus AJ at some point, but this totally rehabilitated Joseph Parker's title aspirations. And then he fights Zhili Zhang, who at the time, again, was looking golden after those back-to-back knockouts over Joe Joyce. And then Zhili Zhang gets into the ring with Joseph Parker, and Joseph Parker starts to outbox Zhili Zhang, but Zhili Zhang lands some big shots. 2 of them knocked Joseph Parker down, but Joseph Parker was really running away with a lot of the rounds where he wasn't getting badly hurt or dropped by Zhili Zhang. It was kind of stunning how little output Zhili Zhang had against Joseph Parker. I mean, with Deontay Wilder's lack of activity, we've actually seen that a lot of times out of Wilder, but Zhili Zhang, aside from his, fight against Jerry Forrest and maybe 1 or 2 others, Zhili Zhang usually throws more punches and boxes better than he did against Joseph Parker. But Zhili Zhang was reduced to being a feast or famine fighter, at least in that fight against Parker. So Parker beats Zhili Zhang via majority decision. Keep in mind, he suffered 2 knockdowns and still wins the fight via decision. So that tells you how many of those other rounds he was winning against Zhili Zhang. So this further rehabilitates his title aspirations. And now Parker finally gets another crack at the title against Daniel Dubois. And boy, you want to talk about redemption. Daniel Dubois, he was a hot prospect for a while. Then he loses via knockout against Joe Joyce. He gets knocked out. He gets his eye busted up. I think he suffered like some sort of a bone fracture. I don't know if it was his orbital bone, but he suffered an eye fracture. He was just getting jabbed like crazy. And, Joe Joyce, the juggernaut, wasn't going anywhere, even when Daniel Dubois would land flush and cleanly. And then Daniel Dubois starts his rehabilitation project, beating Bogdan Dinu, Kusumanu via first round knockout. Kusumanu actually beat Adam Konachki and then tested positive for PEDs. I think that's what just happened with Kusumanu pretty recently. Then Daniel Dubois beats Trevor Bryan to capture like that weird WBA regular title that Trevor Bryan was somehow still holding on to. It was like a Don King promotion as well. How often have you heard that over the past 10 or so, 15, 20 years? And then Daniel Dubois has kind of a weird fight against former cruiserweight Kevin Lerena. Kevin Lerena dropped Dubois like 3 times. It looked like Dubois was either having like an equilibrium problem or was having like a knee issue, but something wasn't going right because he was getting hit with these shots that didn't look like they were hard enough to topple somebody the size of Daniel Dubois. But again, he got dropped. Then he started turning it around, pouring on the offense, and ended up finishing Kevin Lerena in the 3rd round. So it was a bit of a head scratcher. It's like, okay, Daniel Dubois undoubtedly has this immense power, but he got dropped 3 times against Kevin Lerena. So we're still not sure what to make of Daniel Dubois, at least at the elite level. Then Daniel Dubois gets a big title shot against Alexander Usyk. This is when Usyk was fresh off of those back-to-back wins against Anthony Joshua, but this is before Fury versus Usyk won. Usyk is outboxing Daniel Dubois. Daniel Dubois lands, a few nice body shots, and then one of his body shots, which is kind of on the belt line, disputed territory. People still talk about it, whether it should have been ruled a knockdown or not, but he sunk Alexander Usyk with that shot. Usyk's just on the ground writhing in pain after the referee called it a foul. And a lot of people think that this would have resulted in a knockout for Daniel Dubois. But I'm thinking, what makes you think that Alexander Usyk, if he hadn't seen the ref say, time, take your time, it's a foul. Yes, he got dropped by that punch, but I think that if the referee started counting in his face, 5, 6, I'm going to give Usyk the benefit of the doubt and think that he does everything humanly possible to get back to his feet, and he survives that moment. I think that he kind of took more time. I mean, look, that wasn't the only body shot that affected Usyk. You saw him looking at the ref several times like, hey, you're going to do something about this, with shots that appeared to be legal. But still, I don't think that that punch would have necessarily knocked Alexander Usyk out. But I do think that that should have been called a knockdown. I've heard differing theories on where the legal limit is on the belt line, but yeah, Alexander Usyk gets back up, takes a few more body shots throughout the fight, and every time Dubois landed to the body, it seemed to have some impact. But Usyk did his thing, started pouring on more offense, landing some more left hands, and he eventually stopped Daniel Dubois, dropping him twice, knocking him out in the 9th round. And this wasn't a type of knockout that was one of those, yeah, you got hit in the chin and your legs couldn't support you anymore, so you toppled over. No, this was like a decision to take a knee, as was the first of the 2 knockdowns. But Daniel Dubois didn't get up from the second one, and this just kind of fueled the fire, or fueled the discussion around whether Daniel Dubois lacked some heart, whether he was a bit of a, I don't want to use the Q word, right? I just think that that's a bit disrespectful, but that's the talk that had happened, especially when you couple the Usyk stoppage with the Joy stoppage. Both involved Daniel Dubois taking a knee, looking up at the ref, counting in his face, clearly physically able to get back up if he really wanted to, and just deciding, nah, I think I've had enough. This was the second instance that we had of that. So reputation wise, Daniel Dubois, even having arguably not an official knockdown of Usyk, but having that moment against Usyk, the way that he lost to Usyk had a lot of people thinking that maybe he just on the inside isn't built of tough enough stuff to truly be an elite heavyweight. So then he makes his return against Jarrell Big Baby Miller, and a lot of people thought that because of Jarrell Miller's size, his come forward pressure style, his his bully tactics and personality, just that Brooklyn attitude, a lot of people thought that maybe Jarrell Miller could pull the quit out of Daniel Dubois once again. But this one ended up being a redemptive moment for Daniel Dubois. He not only survived the tough times where it looked like, okay, is Jarrell Miller starting to get to him? Is he gonna break Daniel Dubois like the other two did? Not only did Daniel Dubois weather those storms and start taking control of the fight and winning the middle rounds, but he ended up stopping Jarrell Miller in the final 10 seconds of that fight. He got a 10th round stoppage in a 10-round fight. This was a super redemptive moment for Daniel Dubois. It looked like he had crossed a threshold and was now believing in himself in a way that maybe he wasn't fully before. This is just speculation, but I just look at his personality, his demeanor. He seemed like the type who was born physically gifted, but he didn't have like the attitude and the belief and the fortitude to match. He was a professional heavyweight fighter because he was big, he hit hella hard, and he had the physical attributes, but did he have the guts to truly become an elite fighter? The Jarrell Miller fight had us thinking, maybe there's more to Daniel Dubois than we might have personally thought. But then he fights Filip Hrgović, and Hrgović is a big favorite in this one, and just about everybody thought that Hrgović was going to win this fight because Hrgović was the boogeyman of the heavyweight division, and we knew that Daniel Dubois could only take so much punishment before he takes a knee and calls it a day. And Filip Hrgović was still undefeated at this point. Well, this ended up being one of my favorite fights of 2024. Daniel Dubois enters the ring, and this was on that Queensberry versus Matchroom card, but this was supposed to be the fight that gets Eddie Hearn some points because Filip Hrgović was the Eddie Hearn fighter in this one, and he was supposed to beat Daniel Dubois. Daniel Dubois enters this ring to Michael Jackson's Bad, and he just comes in kind of bouncing. He's got the cutoff tee with the sleeveless, and he's got the black trunks, and he just looked like he meant business. And I was like, oh damn, okay. And then he gets in the ring, and Filip Hrgović just launches right hand after right hand, tags Daniel Dubois several times. Like the commentary start to like kind of make fun of the situation because of how many super clean right hands from Filip Hrgović Daniel Dubois is just eating, but he's eating them and he's not buckling. He's still coming forward. And then by the end of the first round, like he ate so many right hands in that first round, but by the end of the first round, he tags Filip Hrgović with a couple right hands of his own. And then the bell sounds, and it's Daniel Dubois who's looking at Filip Hrgović like, I'm willing to go through hell in this fight. Are you? And I feel like, I've always felt this, I feel like by the end of the first round, even though in the second round, Dubois eats several more right hands, same thing with the third round, but I felt like even in that first round, he made a statement and he sent a message to Filip Hrgović. And I think Hrgović, even by that point, because I mean, there was a question of whether Hrgović punched himself out because he was landing so many right hands on Daniel Dubois. And again, Dubois not going anywhere. So I wondered, even watching the fight, like, I wonder how that psychologically might have impacted Filip Hrgović, like hitting Daniel Dubois with all of your best stuff, and he still looks like he wants to go through hell just to get to you and beat the hell out of you. I wondered if there was a part of Filip Hrgović, even as early as the end of the first round, second and third round, where he was thinking, oh boy, I'm not ready for all this. Like, this guy looks like he is willing to fight tooth and nail, blood and guts. I don't know if I want to go there tonight. I feel like there might have been some of that. So it's just ironic that Daniel Dubois used to be the fighter that was pegged, the person who didn't have the biggest heart, right? Filip Hrgović was the one who got broken in this one. And by the middle rounds, you saw the writing was on the wall. Daniel Dubois more and more was getting to Filip Hrgović, rocking him, knocking him back to the ropes, cut his eye. At first they thought it might have been a head, but no, it was ruled a punch. Daniel Dubois started beating the hell out of Filip Hrgović, and then they ended up stopping the fight in the 8th round due to the cut. And I think that that stoppage actually did Filip Hrgović a favor, because he didn't look like he wanted to be there anymore. He was all but done. He was almost, he was just against the ropes by the end of the 7th round, taking a pummeling. And Daniel Dubois, again, hits hard as hell. So if the win over Jarrell Miller was the redemption, this one was the statement. This TKO win over Filip Hrgović, again, the boogeyman of the heavyweight division, who online boxing analyst Richard Dwyer for years has been calling the heir apparent. Daniel Dubois breaking and stopping Filip Hrgović, that put the heavyweight division on notice. That made Daniel Dubois one of the must-see attractions in the whole sport. Then he has the fight against Anthony Joshua, and a lot of people thought, hey, I know Daniel Dubois is surging and he's looking very dangerous right now, but he's about to fight Anthony Joshua, who's just on another level boxing-wise, way more experienced, former 2-time champion, who himself had a lot of momentum coming into this Daniel Dubois fight. And then as soon as this fight starts, where again, Anthony Joshua is a sizable favorite. The question is Anthony Joshua going to finish him, or is it going to go the distance? Some people thought that, yeah, Daniel Dubois got a good puncher's chance at beating AJ, but AJ should win this fight. AJ got obliterated from the first round onward. This was a total destruction. Almost every time Daniel Dubois hit AJ buckled, or at least reacted. He would either get dropped. He got dropped like 4 or 5 times in this fight, and then got finished, dropped face first in the 5th round. This was a 5th round knockout. It's not like this one went to the 8th, 9th round. No, there was not one round in this fight where Anthony Joshua was not suffering at the hands of Daniel Dubois. Daniel Dubois looked like the most dangerous man on the planet in this fight against Anthony Joshua. So his last 3 performances, he just keeps outdoing himself, and then again, dominating and knocking out Anthony Joshua. And Joshua did have that one moment in the fight where he hurt Daniel Dubois seconds after jumping in and then getting finished by a counter right hand from Daniel Dubois. And I swear, just like against Filip Hrgović, Daniel Dubois was acting like he didn't care what the opponent was throwing. Like, I could take your shots and I'm willing to take your shots. Are you willing to take mine? That's been the energy of Daniel Dubois ever since that loss to Alexander Usyk. And again, it's almost been a total reinvention to where now Daniel Dubois is a -225 favorite over the former champ, Joseph Parker. He's a greater than 2-to-1 favorite over Joseph Parker, because that's now what the boxing public thinks of how dangerous Daniel Dubois is. So both of these guys, Daniel Dubois and Joseph Parker, are carrying a ton of momentum going into this fight. And I'm sizing this one up and I'm thinking, look, I know Joseph Parker has the ability to outbox Daniel Dubois. If that same Daniel Dubois who showed up against Filip Hrgović and Anthony Joshua is going to be fighting Joseph Parker, Joe Joyce was also a guy who was getting tagged by Joseph Parker and was unwilling to relent and kept on coming forward and ended up breaking Joseph Parker. Granted, I don't think Daniel Dubois usually throws as many body shots as Joe Joyce does, nor does he jab as much. He's mostly looking to get that right hand off. And if he is too right hand reliant, maybe Joseph Parker does outbox him, does move, does have that craft. But I can assure you, Daniel Dubois is not the type to get his volume reduced in the way that Deontay Wilder and Zhilei Zhang did by Joseph Parker. Zhilei Zhang's like 40 years old. He looks like he just doesn't have the cardio to throw a ton of punches over the course of several rounds. Deontay Wilder's always been pretty low volume, at least through the later stages of his career. He became lower volume. Daniel Dubois is not like that. Daniel Dubois was pushing the pace on Hrgović even as he was eating those right hands. And to just walk up to Anthony Joshua, basically just start launching super hard right hands at Anthony Joshua. Do you know what risk you're putting yourself in throwing those types of punches at Anthony Joshua? Ask Francis Ngannou what happens when you are not defending yourself well, when you're launching your attack on Anthony Joshua. Daniel Dubois seemed like he didn't care about any of that. He was just coming in, bouncing, throwing jab, jab, right hand, jab, jab, right hand. He looked like he had somewhere to be. Again, if that Daniel Dubois enters the ring against Joseph Parker, I don't care what Joseph Parker brings to the table. I know that he's a good boxer. I know that he's super motivated. I know he's on another career resurgence, and this is his chance, becoming a 2-time champ, which, I mean, if Joseph Parker becomes a 2-time champion, that puts his whole career resume in a different light, right? This is a huge opportunity, and it's one that Joseph Parker had to scratch and claw and work so hard for. I just think that Daniel Dubois is at a stage in his career where, if, again, this is the same Daniel Dubois who's willing to take anything that you have to give and just wants to launch his arsenal at you, nothing else matters. I'm actually going to go Daniel Dubois to not only beat Joseph Parker, but to stop Joseph Parker. And again, all respect to Joseph Parker, I just think that this is that stage of Daniel Dubois' career. Now, Joseph Parker, again, he's got the tools to outbox Dubois. I just think that if Dubois, again, is as relentless as he's been in his last couple fights, I just don't think that Joseph Parker can withstand that many power punches coming from a puncher as accurate as Daniel Dubois. So the early rounds are going to be interesting, and it's going to be interesting to see how quickly Daniel Dubois gets hyper aggressive, and we'll see what Joseph Parker can do to kind of stunt some of that activity. But again, I'm going Daniel Dubois to finish Joseph Parker probably somewhere between round 6 and round 9. Now I just want to take a brief moment and talk Zhang against Kabayel. Zhang, after losing that decision to Joseph Parker, which again followed the back-to-back knockouts over Joe Joyce, Zhang just knocked out Deontay Wilder. Two kind of low volume feast or famine fighters. That is not who Kabayel is. Kabayel, he's an undefeated fighter. He has now beaten Arslanbek Makhmudov via stoppage and Frank Sanchez via stoppage. I really wonder how bad Frank Sanchez's leg was going into that fight. We haven't seen him in the ring since, although he does have a fight scheduled. But yeah, those were two huge wins for Kabayel. I mean, when he beat Makhmudov was seen as one of those boogeymen in the division, and he stopped Makhmudov by the 4th round, just outboxed him, totally outclassed him, just punished him to the body, and he broke Makhmudov to where Makhmudov was just against the ropes and was just getting obliterated to the body. And every now and then he would catch him up top, but it almost seemed like Makhmudov was willing to take the shots up top because of how much he was getting just beaten to the body. So Kabayel could punch. He's a pretty good defensive fighter, although before those back-to-back wins over Makhmudov and Frank Sanchez, Kabayel actually got hurt really badly against Agran Smakici. Go back and look at that fight. It took place in Germany. He got hurt really badly to where he looked like he was ready to go. And then he ended up finishing Smakici by the end of the 3rd round. So Kabayel, I have seen him hurt badly, but he's got some pop. 17 out of his 25 wins have come via knockout or stoppage. And again, I think that Kabayel, since he's a mover and since he's fighting the low volume Zhang, and although Zhang is a lefty, so he's not like the statue that Makhmudov is, where he's throwing kind of predictable clubbing shots. Zhang isn't the most mobile guy, and again, he doesn't look like he's willing to throw a ton of punches, and he gets winded and tired, even in a lot of the fights that he's competitive in or winning, like when he fought Filip Ergovic. Like, he just looked like he was exhausted. Kabayel has an engine. He's a good boxer, and again, he's got enough pop to make you respect him. I'm kind of thinking that Zhang, even though again he's a pretty crafty power puncher, right? He does look to drop that left hand, and he is low volume, but he's tricky in how he sets it up, and he also has a sneaky good right hook. Look at how he caught Joe Joyce in that rematch and made Joe Joyce face plant. Beautiful counter right hook. So Zhang's got the tools to knock Kabayel out. I just think that Kabayel can employ a similar game plan that Joseph Parker implemented, maybe even a little bit better at this stage of Kabayel's career relative to Parker, but I would approximate their style somewhat. At least that's the style that Joseph Parker had implemented against Zhang. And again, I think that a lot of what Parker did well, Kabayel could do well as well. I think he's going to beat Zhang via decision. I wouldn't be totally surprised if Zhang catches Kabayel, because again, he does detonate those punches, and Kabayel is going to have to come in and come out, and is going to have to, swim without getting wet, to quote the late great Nassim Richardson. Even though Mac 10 and Ice Cube also said it in some rap tracks back in the 90s. But Kabayel is going to have to launch his offense, but is going to have to stay careful because of what Zhang is looking to do. So I wouldn't rule out a Zhang knockout of Kabayel. And boy, if Zhang knocks Kabayel out, he's probably right back in line for a title shot or something big. But I'm going to go with Kabayel outboxing Big Bang, Zhang, and I think that Kabayel is going to win a decision here. But yeah, let me know your thoughts on both of these heavyweight fights. Who do you think is going to win between Daniel Dubois and Joseph Parker? And who do you think is going to win between Zhang and Ajit Kabayel? Let me know your thoughts in the comments, like the video, subscribe to the channel if you are into the fight talk. I'm Woog. Thanks for tuning in.